develop them into people who won't make the same mistakes over and over again. Alright, so, well, why this plethora of tools? Well, I said, in some sense, being a personality psychologist is like being an engineer. You're trying to build better people. And you might say that if you're a carpenter or a mechanic, that your ability to fix a vehicle or build a house is dependent on your proficiency with regards to the use of a multitude of tools. And so then you might say, well, the more tools you have at your disposal, the more likely it is that you're going to manage things properly. And so what I would like to offer you is the possibility that what you're going to encounter in this course is a series of sophisticated conceptual tools that will help you understand yourself better and therefore better orient yourself in the world. I regard this course as intensely practical, and that's because I believe that you have nothing to rely on in your life that's more crucial to your success as you move through life than your character and your personality. That's what you bring to every situation. And the more sophisticated you are in relationship to yourself and others, the more you understand people, the deeper you understand the nature of your own being, the more likely it is that you're going to proceed through your life in a manner that will make you pleased to exist rather than displeased to exist. I've collected the writings of people that I regard as of incomparable brilliance. They're difficult to understand. Their concepts are complex, but it's not surprising because the subject matter is complex and vital. And so it requires work, and I would say try to keep up on the readings if you would. It's going to make the course much richer for you. And I would say, because people often ask me, well, how should I read for this course? Because there's a lot of reading. And the answer is, read as if it matters. That's the right answer. Don't be thinking about how it's going to be tested. If you do the readings and you come to the lectures, then the tests aren't particularly difficult. But you should read the readings as if the person is writing about you. And you should try to understand what the person says, because it's another tool for you to use. And I would say, well, with my clients, you know, I use the approaches of one theorist for one client and the approaches of another theorist for another client. It seems to me to depend to some degree actually on the temperament of the client. I've found, for example, that people who are very high in openness, which is the creativity dimension, are quite amenable to a Jungian approach, whereas people who are more practical, conscientious, low in openness are much more amenable to a behaviorist approach. We don't really know enough about psychology yet to match treatment to temperament, but those are some of the things that I've experienced. Okay, practicalities. Well, there's a website. I gave you the URL. I'll put it up again at the end of class. The URL lists all the readings that aren't in the textbook. And so the textbook contains the classic readings from people like Jung and Freud and Piaget and so forth, Rogers. And as I said, I picked that particular textbook because I believe that the author did a very credible job of summarizing what's very difficult to summarize. So, and then also on the website there are links to papers, because much of the more modern material that pertains, say, to neuroscience and also to trait personality, I think it's better just to read the original papers, and I'll detail them out with you as we go through, and that'll also give you some familiarity with original psychological papers, which are, again, there's an idiom that you have to master in order to understand them, but you might as well practice it, especially if you're interested in continuing with psychology in your educational practice or as a career. It's good to get accustomed to it. So there again is the URL for the class. If you go to jordanbpeterson.com, which isn't too hard to remember, assuming you can remember my name, then classes are listed on the left hand side. You can just find the the syllabus there. Alright, so here's what we're going to cover. Well, today obviously this is the introduction and overview. The class is a little strange this year because one day it's an hour and the next day it's 2 hours, so not exactly sure how we're going to negotiate our way through that, but we'll figure it out. Historical perspectives, mythological representations. Well, I told you that I would try to provide you with a meta-narrative that might enable you to link the theories that we're going to talk about together. So I'm going to describe to you what you might regard as a conceptual language. And as far as I can tell, it's the imagine that there are two kinds of things that you need to know. And I believe this to be the case. I believe that you need to know what the world is made of, and I suppose that's the proper domain of science. But then you need to know how to act, and that's a whole different thing. And you need to know how to act. That's the thing you need to know most of anything, because of course you're a living creature, and action in relationship to desired goals is everything to you. And you can think about that from a Darwinian perspective. You have to act at least so that you can survive, at least so that you can find a partner. That's life. And so part of the question is, well, how does the world look if you think about it as a place to act? And the answer isn't a place of value-free objects. That's not what the world looks like. And you can't act in a world of value-free objects because there's no way of choosing between them. If everything has zero value, why would you choose one thing over another? You live in a world where things present themselves to you as of different value. And that's partly a consequence of your temperament, although it's a consequence of other things. And so what I'm going to try to do is to provide you with a schema that describes the world of morality, roughly speaking, which is how to act, and tell you a little bit about what I think the language is, which I think was derived from Darwinian processes. And I believe that it's within that structure that the clinical theories logically nest. And so that'll give you a way of linking one theory to another from a conceptual perspective without having to rely so much on sheer memorization. Then we'll talk about heroic and shamanic initiations, and the reason we're going to do that is because, well, people used shamanic initiations for tens of thousands of years all over the world, and they have a particular kind of structure. The paper by Mircea Eliade, which is linked on the site, is a very interesting one. It details out some of these processes. There have been intelligent commentators like Henri Ellenberger, who wrote The Discovery of the Unconscious, which I think is an outstanding book, who linked the processes that the psychoanalysts uncovered in the late part of the 19th century and early part of the 20th century back to these more primordial rituals of personality transformation. And so we're going to situate ourselves in some sense in deep history, talking first about the underlying mythological landscape, then talking about archaic modes of personality conceptualization and transformation, and then moving from there into constructivism. And we're going to concentrate mostly on Jean Piaget, who was a developmental psychologist. Constructivists believe that you make yourself out of the information that you gather in the world. So you're an exploring creature. You explore specifically when the maps that you're using in the world are no longer orienting yourself properly, when they're producing errors. You go out and gather information and assemble yourself from the information that you discovered. Then the depth psychologists, Jung and Freud. I think with Jung, I'm going to walk you through some films. I'm not going to use the films per se. I'm going to use clips, stills from the film, but you know the film, so in chronological order. And I'm going to try to explain to you how you might use Jungian presuppositions to understand what the films are about. You know, if you think about a film, say, like The Lion King, which was an extraordinarily popular film, it's a very strange phenomena that you go and watch it, right? I mean, think about it. It's drawings of animated animals that in some sense represent you. They're very low resolution, but you perceive them immediately as living things, and you attribute to them motivation and motive power and understanding. You do it automatically without even thinking about it. And there's a classic plot that lies underneath those stories, and the plots are very, 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 very old, and that's why you can understand them. And the reason you can understand them is because life has a plot, or maybe it has a couple of plots, a multitude of plots, but life has a plot, and if it didn't, we wouldn't be able to understand each other. And so I'd like to illustrate that for you by analysis of some of these films. I think it's the best way to understand someone as sophisticated as Jung, who is very difficult to get a handle on. Freud, I'm going to do the same thing, although I am going to show you a film with Freud. I'm going to show you a film called Crumb, which is a documentary, and it's about a very badly enmeshed family and the attempts of the family members to, I suppose, escape it. I'll talk to you about Freud, I'll show you the film. That should give you a sense of Freudian psychopathology, which is a very difficult thing otherwise to understand. Then there's a midterm. The midterm is multiple choice. You'll do it in class. You'll have lots of time to finish it. It'll cover the material that we studied up to that point. Then we're going to talk about Rogers, Carl Rogers, who's a humanist. Rogers has a body-centered philosophy, I suppose, and he's interested as well in optimal personal development and the role that interpersonal communication plays in that. Rogers' hypothesis fundamentally, and it's a very interesting one, is that honest communication between two people can produce personality transformation. And you know, you might think, well, you kind of know that already because there's something very engaging about a deep, honest conversation where you're able to say things that you wouldn't normally say, where you're being listened to by someone who's actually listening to you and you're listening to them, and in the conversation you're moving both of you further to a different point. That's different than a conversation where you're right and you're trying to convince me, or I'm right and I'm trying to convince you, which I would say is the typical conversation. The healing conversation is more, well, what's up with you? You know, how are you doing? How's your life going? What sort of problems are you facing? What do you think about those problems? Can you conceptualize what a solution might be? Is there a way we could figure out how to get there? You know, so it's a problem-solving conversation, and it's predicated on the presupposition that the person that you're conversing with has the capacity to grow in a positive direction if they so choose. That's the fundamental presupposition of Rogerian psychology. May and Frankl are also humanists. I'll finish telling you what the rest of the material is the next time that we meet. I should let you know a little bit more about the structure of the course. The second midterm is March 14th. And there's a final at the end as well. So the multiple choice tests are graded in that manner: 25%, 25%, and 27.5%. They're not cumulative. Each test only covers what you covered before, since the last test, including the final. You'll be required to write an essay of 15%. It's 1,000 words, sorry, not 750 words. And you'll also do an online exercise, a personality analysis, which is pass-fail. All you have to do is complete it and show proof of completion. It helps you do a modified Big Five analysis of your own personality, concentrating on your virtues and your faults, so it's an active exercise in the application of personality theory to personal development. And so that's the structure of the course. I can tell you, there's a sign-up sheet on the syllabus. I've broken the essays down into multiple types across the entire semester. I would highly recommend that you go there and sign up. There are limited slots for each topic, and the reason for that is, well, I don't want my TA to have to grade 200 essays the last week of classes. We have to spread them out across the year. So figure out a topic and sign up. Please do that sooner rather than later. It's an industrious thing to do. It'll help you organize yourself. I'll post something that's quite useful about how to write, especially a 1,000-word essay. And I'll close, the essays are due one day before class. I'll close, by the way, by telling you who shouldn't take this course, okay? First of all, if you didn't like this lecture, then don't take this course, because this is what the lectures are going to be like. So, and they're not for everybody. I use a lot of loose associations and try to gather them back in, and I kind of wander around that way I can talk directly to you, which I like doing, but I sacrifice a certain amount of organization for that. But my sense is that it's worth the sacrifice. The second thing is there's a lot of reading, a lot. And a lot of it is, I would say, a lot of it's hard science, the last half in particular. But the first half of a lot of it's philosophical in nature, philosophical / psychological. And so if you're not interested in that, like if you're a pure science type and you're not interested in the clinical elements, say, of personality, and in investigating the philosophical underpinnings of those clinical theories, then I would say this isn't the course for you. And so you should take that seriously, because the readings are hard, there's a lot of work involved in this course, and it would be better if you took a course that you actually wanted to take. So, well, welcome to Psychology 230, and we'll see you in a bit.